So, still with pattern, but moving to another kind of pattern. The patterns that you've observed in Gaza reminded you of two other cases that you've investigated, very different cases, apparently, but with similar pattern. One was in Guatemala, the other one in Namibia. So let's briefly remind ourselves what you saw first in Guatemala.
So firstly, just to say that although the majority of our work during the genocide in Gaza was on Gaza, we have not stopped working on other places. And we had ongoing work in different places, including Namibia, where I was, and I was asked also to deliver expert testimony in the genocide trial of Lucas Garcia, who was the head of the Guatemalan army at the turn of the 80s, 1979 to 1982, where a genocidal campaign against the Ixil Maya people, Maya-speaking people that are living on the highlands of Guatemala. And this was one of the first cases that forensic architecture did, because I got into that case through an interview with one of the greatest human rights forensic person, Clyde Snow, who was doing human rights exhumation there, or exhumation for proving the genocide, reading the genocide on the bodies that. And he asked me at the time, it was back in 2011, I think, to go to Guatemala and to look at the architectural dimension of that genocide. And of course, the Guatemalan military under Lucas Garcia and then Rios Montt destroyed about 400 Ixil Maya villages, deforested huge part of the land, and concentrated the survivors in model villages on the valley under government control. And what our task at the time was actually to firstly find out and map where the villages were. And of course, you know, villages that were razed and burned, you know, 40 years later, the forest, the cloud forest, is actually regrown on the ruins, and you actually go through very thick forest and you don't know exactly where the village is. Sometimes you need to follow the trees because a higher density of particular type of papaya or avocado would designate a space that might have been inhabited, or you see an area where the forest seems a bit younger than around, and obviously it's secondary growth forest on the clearing. The villages were in forest clearing, and then you can limit your research, and then you take sticks, you stick it into the ground until you find the foundation. Every organic matter of that building has been consumed by the forest. But slowly, we reconstruct the villages, count the number of buildings, understand the logic of distribution, work together with Mayan communities on what was the form of life that existed there, which is a kind of liminal type of agriculture in which things are cultivated within forest. They are not an orchard versus the forest, but slightly more things that you need are existing in the forest next to you, or even small clearings within the forest you can grow maize in, etc. So there was that kind of continuity that was sustaining the life of the Ixil Maya people, not only their biological life, but also the cultural and religious life. And of course, the genocide involves direct killing of Maya people and mass graves and horrible atrocities. But effectively, a lot of it was done through the environment. The forest was burned. The relationship between the forest, field, and homestead and village were actually demolished. That was the foundation of life for the Ixil Maya people. And then some people resisted and went and lived on a mountain where they were starved. So went higher on a mountain, they had not enough nutrition. They died of starvation and disease in these extermination areas. And those that complied went down into the valley. It had a vertical, clear vertical dimension, went down to the valley into some kind of something that is like reservation, you know, where people from a whole lot of area were concentrated in small area and developed there to integrate into the national economy, were taught to cultivate particular type of species, very much reduced, etc. So that was something that, you know, without making like direct analogy, no, I mean the valley and the hill, North Gaza, which was completely ordered to evacuate, South Gaza, which was the area where some kind of limited version of humanitarian aid was allowed to enter. I thought that that is the architecture of genocide is based on those, on this kind of, you know, evacuation area and destination area and annihilation area that were very clearly seen in the architecture in Guatemala. We were also working in Namibia at the time. Of course, the German colonial genocide against the Nama and Over-Herero people that, okay, exactly when it began, there's, you know, contestation and debate about, but at early years, I mean, for the Herero, the kind of the understanding is 1904 to 1908. German settler colonialism escalates into genocide based on an insurgency. By the way, also in Guatemala, the left-wing insurgency was also had some bases in the remote mountains of the Ixil Maya, so that the settler colonial state takes the humiliated defeats, initial defeats, into a genocidal rage and implementation of that kind of form of destruction, which in the case of the Over-Herero in the fall of 1904, with a clear extermination order against the Herero, and then and the genocide, of course, involved also direct killing, poisoning, and hanging of Herero people. But the majority of killing is done by the environment. The relationship, the Herero livelihood and form of life is grounded in the more or less fertile valley around Windhoek and Okahanja, in the relation between certain kind of grass, bushes, and cattle. The cattle are being destroyed, and the people are expelled beyond the line of water divide into a more arid area, and the environment does the killing. And again, you have that, and then, you know, when the extermination order is revoked, people are concentrated, collected from large landscape and concentrated in concentration area, concentration camp, where they still suffer kind of abuse, forced labor, rape, execution, but the genocide takes another shape at that moment. And yeah, so you start seeing those relations between you know, another settler colonial genocide in Palestine erupting around the rage of a military defeat, leading to expulsion into concentration areas, and the demolition of the conditions of life that ground those people in place.